Alright, what's up everyone, I'm Faloki, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about how Jadeveon Clowney could potentially sign with the Seattle Seahawks. Now obviously, Jadeveon Clowney is someone who's been a big question mark throughout the entirety of this offseason so far, and with only 3 weeks until the season starts, he's going to have to do something soon. Of course, there have been a lot of teams that have offered him contracts throughout this offseason, but the Seattle Seahawks, the Browns, and the Titans are the 3 main names that people are looking at right now about the potential of him signing. And today I'm going to talk about why I believe the Seahawks might just be a possibility. Now obviously, Jadeveon Clowney is someone who has been asking for a ton of money this offseason. At the beginning of free agency, he was asking for $20 million, and no team really wanted to give him that. Then he went down to 17. He's reportedly declined multiple offers at $15 million, but I think that now he's going to get a bit desperate since the season is starting, and he's probably going to sign for much lower. Last Sunday, August 16th, ESPN's Jeremy Fowler was speaking a little bit on Jadeveon Clowney, and he had this to say. The wait continues. There is no indication that Jadeveon Clowney is ready to sign today. This could push up right until week 1. I've spoken to several teams and they believe his asking price is around $17 million per year. Now they haven't heard exactly just yet because he's been pretty quiet, but nobody's willing to pay that right now. He's gotten multiple offers from multiple teams, anywhere from the Cleveland Browns, Tennessee Titans, Seattle Seahawks. He hasn't budged on that asking price. He's coming up to a situation where he's got to decide if he wants to play this year or could he wait out the entire next season. There's still several teams heavily monitoring this. From that quote, it's pretty clear to see that Jadeveon Clowney still wants that $17 million that he was asking for, but no team is really wanting to pay that. I don't think any team's really going to give him a long-term deal, nor will they give him anywhere near the $17 million. I think most teams will probably offer him anywhere between $8 and $13 million on a 1-year rental if they can afford it, just to have him for 1 year, and I think that no long-term deals are going to come out of this. I don't see any team getting a long-term deal with Jadeveon Clowney done this offseason. I think he's going to sign a 1-year rental, play with the team, and then try to increase his value next year, and that is why I believe he'll go to the Seattle Seahawks. With the 2020 NFL season starting in less than 3 weeks, if Jadeveon Clowney is going to sign with a new team, he's going to have to do it pretty quick, or he'll most likely sign late to a team that he already knows the scheme of, the players, and the playbook, the Seattle Seahawks. I believe there's a good chance that the Seattle Seahawks sign Jadeveon Clowney on a 1-year rental for a pretty cheap price because Jadeveon Clowney, he already knows the scheme. There's a lot of great players that have been added to the Seahawks roster this year, and he could probably go to Seattle on a 1-year rental pretty cheap and prove himself since he already knows the scheme. He won't have to learn a whole new team within the next few weeks, and I think the Seattle defense is going to be very good this season, and if Jadeveon Clowney goes, that's just going to add to it, and he's going to be able to probably produce much better than he did last season, and that'll definitely get him a lot more money when he's going into the next set of free agents. Personally, I don't see this potential signing of Jadeveon Clowney to Seattle as a long-term option whatsoever. Jadeveon Clowney has a very high asking price, and the Seahawks are going to have to sign some pretty big-name players on their defense to much bigger contracts. Chris Carson might get a bigger contract. Shaquille Griffin and Jamal Adams are almost guaranteed to get a bigger contract with the Seattle Seahawks. So Jadeveon Clowney, I think that he's asking too high of a price for too long of a deal for the Seahawks to really be interested in him for more than just this 1 year. But I do think that Jadeveon Clowney signing with the Seahawks on a 1-year rental to kind of prove himself to the Seahawks or any other team would be good for both sides. The Seahawks aren't going to be locked into a long-term deal if they get him on a 1-year relatively cheap deal, and he's not going to be locked into a long-term deal that he doesn't want to be in. He'll sign 1 year, probably get around $10 million, and he'll be able to prove himself with a lot of great players around him in a scheme he already knows. He won't have to learn a whole new scheme, and he can try to prove himself. He'll try to prove to other teams that he's worth the money that he's going to be asking next year if he does get this 1-year rental, and I think that it could potentially raise his price next year in free agency. The reason I think this is good for both sides is because Seattle is obviously trying to win now, like they have been for a while, and adding Jadeveon Clowney to the already pretty stacked defense that they have is definitely going to be a big factor in them trying to push for a Super Bowl. And Jadeveon Clowney, I think it's good for him in the long term because obviously he'll be on this 1-year deal, not what he wants, not the money that he wants, not the long-term contract that he wants, but if he can come into a scheme that he already knows, be around such great players, and produce much better than he did last season without injuries, without anything to kind of make teams wary of signing him next free agency, I think he could get a huge contract by any team that really wants a pass rusher if he does end up proving himself this season, if he does sign with the Seattle Seahawks. Now obviously the quote from Jeremy Fowler when he was talking about teams that had potential interest in Jadeveon Clowney did not only mention the Seattle Seahawks, it mentioned the Cleveland Browns and the Tennessee Titans as well. And taking a look at the top 51 contracts to kind of gauge how much money these teams would have, the Seahawks would have a little bit over $11 million, the Cleveland Browns would have $38 million, and the Tennessee Titans would have $20 million. Now obviously out of these 3 teams, the Seattle Seahawks have the least amount of money by far, and Jadeveon Clowney, he has seemed to be pretty interested in the money, but he did say early on that he wanted to go to a team that he could potentially win a Super Bowl with, and I think coming back to Seattle on a cheap 1-year deal with such great players around him to try to prove himself, to get some stats, get some production, to make other teams teams more interested in for the next free agency, I think that would be a good option for him. Obviously, I think the Browns and the Titans could both give him more money than the Seahawks could if they wanted to, but I don't know if any team's actually going to give him anywhere near that $17 million mark. I think if Jadeveon Clowney is getting deals between $10 million and $13 million, say he gets a $10 million deal for 1 year from the Seahawks and a $13 million deal for 1 year from the Browns, I think he's taking the Seahawks deal, trying to prove himself in a scheme he already knows with Jamal Adams, Quandre Diggs, Bobby Wagner, Shaquille Griffin, other really great players on that defense, and I think that it could potentially be a good thing for him in the long run. Of course, there's a pretty good likelihood that Jadeveon Clowney signs with a different team other than Seattle, or even doesn't play this next season. I think him not playing this next season would be absolutely horrible for him, because then teams would only be able to look at that year before with the Seahawks where he was injured and then he didn't play the next year, so it'd be really hard for him to get a big contract that he wants if he doesn't play this next season. So I do think he's going to be signing, and since it's so close to the season start, I think Jadeveon Clowney, he doesn't really have too many options. He either has to sign very soon with a team that he's going to have to learn how to play with, learn the scheme, and maybe he'll get a bit of a bigger contract for 1 year, or he can sign with the Seattle Seahawks on a probably cheaper contract, but he's definitely going to be getting a much better situation. He knows the scheme. He's going to have very good players around him, and he'll be able to potentially prove himself to get a much bigger contract next year. So with that, of course, Jadeveon Clowney is just a huge question mark. Teams have been offering him stuff, but no one really knows what's going on between Jadeveon Clowney and other teams. And, I think that the Seattle Seahawks are definitely a good option for Jadeveon Clowney. I think a 1 year deal with the Seahawks, he knows the scheme, knows the players, and there are going to be new players that are also very good that can go around to help the defense be better and help Jadeveon Clowney produce more. And obviously, last season he was playing injured, so if he plays this season uninjured, does really well, I think he's getting a huge contract next season. He might even be able to get that $20 million that he wants. And I think that Jadeveon Clowney, he has been very reluctant to sign this offseason because he wants a lot of money, but I don't think he's getting this money this year. I think he might be able to get the money next year if he gets a 1 year deal like I've been saying and produces, but he's not getting the money this year. It's almost guaranteed that no team is going to sign him for anywhere close to the $17 million that he wants. Definitely no long-term deals. So I think that his best option is to go to Seattle, try to prove himself, and get a lot of money next season. And I think it's a pretty good possibility. The Browns and the Titans, obviously they have the money, but I don't know if Jadeveon Clowney is going to fit well in that scheme or be able to learn the scheme fast enough to be able to produce early on in the season. So I think the Seahawks are definitely the best option for Jadeveon Clowney because he knows the scheme. The season's really close to starting. He can get with the new players, get with a lot of great players, do well, produce, get a bigger contract. And I think Jadeveon Clowney is probably one of the best options for Seattle right now if they can get him on a cheap 1 year deal, because Everson Griffen is gone. Clay Matthews would not have been the same type of player that Everson Griffen would have been, and Jadeveon Clowney, we had him last year. He did well. He had some pressure. He didn't have the sack numbers. He didn't really produce as much as he definitely could have, but he still played well, and I think he'll definitely help the team if he does end up getting signed to a 1 year deal. So I think this could potentially work for both sides, but let me know in the comments what you think. I've given my piece. Let me know what you think about it. Should the Seahawks sign Jadeveon Clowney? Do you think Jadeveon Clowney will sign with the Seattle Seahawks? If not, what team do you think he could possibly go to? But with that, like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, subscribe to my second channel. Gonna be some videos coming out, especially now that 2K is coming out very soon, and follow me on Twitch. I'll start streaming in September, maybe some Madden, maybe some 2K, maybe any other game that I could potentially play on stream. Just, go support me in other ventures, and that would be greatly appreciated. And with that, I'd like to thank you for watching. Have a great day.